Oh, yes. Welcome to today's show, episode 513. Is that right? Can you believe it? How you doing, folks? Shout out to Rob Dog here at the top, a longtime listener, lets me know he has COVID. Anybody who lets me know they've got COVID or maybe they've got something to celebrate, something that's not an illness. I always love to give shout-outs to listeners. Rob, I hope you're feeling better. I'm sure there are several more of you that have gotten it over the last few days or weeks. I'll probably be getting it any moment now. The waiting is killing me. It's really challenging, I think, for a lot of folks to be in a kind of a holding pattern to see what is going to happen and almost want to get, I think, COVID so you can get it over with and not have it cancel plans or important things. I've got an awesome show for you today. It's Paul Rieckhoff, a former Iraq, Afghanistan Veterans of America, now the host of Independent Americas, and the president of the Florida Education Association, Andrew Spar, joining me as well to talk about schools and COVID and crazy Florida and much more. Two great conversations coming your way. Very excited to have you here. Maybe I'll see you tonight. Because maybe you're a stand-up subscriber, which means you're always invited to join us for the Hangouts. You get a link to the Zoom room, the happy hour, stand-up happy hour hangout tonight at 8 Eastern. Hope to see you there. Always great to see new faces, meet new people, check in with everybody once a week at 8 Eastern. So sign up now if you're not already a subscriber. You don't know what you're missing. It's $5 or more. A lot of people edit their pledges or pay more than that, but we're happy to have you. Everybody gets benefits like this. Also the Discord chat and tons of new listeners here in the new year. So I'd love to have you sign up and join us and support the show. And I am getting texts from Pete Coe as we speak. He had to work, and he was not able to record a show opening or a news dump. So this is going to be a different kind of show. I mean, I'm going to have to recycle one. Oh, God, Pete, you really let me down. You really let me down. I mean, we get so used to your original introductions and news dumps, and then you have other responsibilities. I kid you, Pete Coe. It's an embarrassment of riches that you have provided to me and everybody that listens. Take a break, buddy. Everybody's entitled to one. He does it out of the kindness of his heart. We love him and always appreciate when they're there. And if they're not, we will go on because we've got more original jingles than the Howard Stern Show here on Stand Up with our talented group of musicians and lyricists and comedians and more. All right, well, there's plenty of news to get to from Merrick Garland, the Attorney General's speech, to all other things. January 6th, it is the anniversary today, January 6th, of the insurrection last year. Do you remember where you were and what you were doing and how it affected you? There's so many ways to think about it and look at it, but I think We'll dig into Merrick Garland's comments first here on The Last 24. All right, well, let's get right to those Merrick Garland comments. Get us started. Here he is yesterday. This is a bit of a mashup of his comments and then a couple of other quick clips and reactions. Attorney General Merrick Garland.
The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy. We will follow the facts wherever they lead. We understand that there are questions about how long the investigation will take and about what exactly we are doing. As long as it takes and whatever it takes for justice to be done consistent with the facts and the law.
Now, while there's plenty to criticize Merrick Garland for the investigations into January 6th and Trump and his cohorts, I think, and I'll play those for you in a minute, I think that Merrick Garland has been given pretty good grades on voting rights. Of course, the Department of Justice oversees the Voting Rights Division, and he's doing what he can legally to try to file lawsuits against states who have created all kinds of voter restrictions the moment they could. Here he is also talking about that yesterday.
There has been a dramatic increase in legislative enactments that make it harder for millions of eligible voters to vote and to elect representatives of their own choosing. Those enactments range from practices and procedures that make voting more difficult to redistricting maps drawn to disadvantage both minorities and citizens of opposing political parties, to abnormal post-election audits that put the integrity of the voting process at risk, there has been a dramatic increase in legislative enactments that make it harder for millions of eligible voters to vote and to elect representatives of their own choosing. Those enactments range from practices and procedures that make voting more difficult, to redistricting maps drawn to disadvantage both minorities and citizens of opposing political parties, to abnormal post-election audits that put the integrity of the voting process at risk.
And finally, Merrick Garland, here's one more clip of him saying that they're not done. It's going to take a while, but they're going to do a thorough investigation. Not that this comment or any of the comments made his critics happy. We'll hear from them in a minute, but here's one more.
The actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy. We will follow the facts wherever they lead.
All right, well, let's listen to some of the critics of Merrick Garland, starting with Elie Mystal. He was on MSNBC with Joy Reid last night.
If Donald's last name was Clinton and he was a Democrat, I have no doubt whatsoever that he would already have been prosecuted. There would already be so much legal action being thrown at him. I think that he's sort of in this bubble of, I don't know. I'm going to let you talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. This doesn't happen if the perpetrators are black. And I think we all kind of know that, right? Because we don't have to just go on our feelings about Merrick Garland. We have actual numbers, right? We have stats. 71 people so far have been sentenced behind January 6th. And what we see is the vast majority of them have gotten very light sentences, no jail time at all for the most of them. 56 people have been convicted for picketing, parading inside a Capitol building. 56 people. Is it too much to ask that those 56 people get at least what a person in Northeast D.C. would get for having an ounce of crack cocaine? Is that literally too much to ask? Because it seems like it shouldn't be. It seems like if you go into the Capitol with the intent to go search for Mike Pence and other members of Congress to yell and intimidate them into stealing an election, you should at least get as much as the crackhead.
You just got to love Elie Mystal, and he's written all about this as well at The Nation. And let's go to another critic of Merrick Garland's, Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego on MSNBC yesterday.
There's an ongoing slow coup by a bunch of Brooks Brothers dressed politicians. They're going to try to basically change who counts the votes for the elections coming up in 2022 and 2024. So in some regards, yes, I think we're more resilient in case of a physical coup attack. But at the same time, the ongoing political coup is occurring. Now, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be holding more people accountable. I think Merrick Garland has been extremely weak. And I think there should be a lot more of the organizers of January 6th that should be arrested by now. There's an ongoing slow coup by a bunch of Brooks Brothers dressed politicians. They're going to try to basically change who counts the votes for the elections coming up in 2022 and 2024. So in some regards, yes, I think we're more resilient in case of a physical coup attack. But at the same time, the ongoing political coup is occurring. Now, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be holding more people accountable. I think Merrick Garland has been extremely weak. And I think there should be a lot more of the organizers of January 6th that should be arrested by now.
All right, Ruben Gallego. Now let's head into the press briefing room. Jen Psaki speaking for President Biden yesterday on his concerns about our democracy and voting and all the rest.
The president said he had, quote, an open mind about dealing with certain things that are just elemental to the functioning of our democracy, like the right to vote, like the basic right to vote. We've amended the filibuster in the past. He's also said previously that senseless obstruction would be a big factor for him. And I think there's no question, objectively, Republicans have not once but 4 times obstructed basic legislation that should not be partisan, but is about upholding our Constitution as they simultaneously attack the most fundamental American right, the right to vote. He also said back in December that if necessary, he supports a rule change to uphold the sacred right of Americans to vote. And this is reflective of the fact that while he is a creature of the Senate and somebody who respects the history of the Senate, he wants the Senate to function. And he wants to move towards and is open to rules changes that will help the Senate function. So I expect he'll have more to say about that. But I just wanted to note a couple of the things he said, including right before Christmas.
All right. I don't know what you said right there at the end. I'm not sure what she was talking about. I think that I needed more context on that. Sorry. But here is the Schooms, Chuck Schumer, on a similar issue and topic yesterday.
My colleagues, the threats that I have mentioned are the symptoms of an illness festering deep within the bones of our democracy. And unless we confront the big lie, unless all of us do our part to fortify and strengthen our democracy, the political violence of January 6th risks becoming little more than a taste of dangers to come. All of us have a role to play to protect our democratic system. Everyone, from our Capitol Police to the voting public, to those of us entrusted to serve in elected office. And again, just as the Capitol Police have taken the experience of January 6th to institute reforms for the future, every member of the United States Senate is called on to do the same, to reckon with the lessons of that terrible day, and to take action to cure America of the disease of the big lie. That means passing legislation to protect our democracy from subversion and safeguard the right to vote, including the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. In the weeks to come, I look forward to working with all my colleagues to achieve this goal.
All right, here's the chairman of the January 6th committee. They're now talking about whether or not they're going to be able to question Mike Pence and what value he might have.
I would hope that he would do the right thing and come forward and voluntarily talk to the committee. Everybody there didn't have a security detail. So we'd like to know what his security detail told him was going on.
All right, here is Democrat Congressman also on that committee investigation, Pete Aguilar on CNN with Jay Tapper.
Your committee wants to also hear directly from former Vice President Mike Pence. He was in the Capitol with you all that day, not at the White House. So what kind of information do you want from him?
Well, what we've said all along is understanding the pressure campaign that was being put by folks in the White House to other states and to potentially the vice president. Those types of aspects are important to our work. We need to have more clarity specifically on what was happening those 187 minutes on January 6th. But the time from the election until January 5th and January 6th, that's an important timeline as well.
And here's Senator Elizabeth Warren talking about the Senate rules standing in the way of voting rights. I like this.
When the Senate rules stand in the way of voting rights legislation, then those Senate rules must change. A year after an insurrection at our nation's capital, we must do more than speak up about the importance of democracy. Now we must act. It is time to end the filibuster, time to protect voting rights, and time to defend our democracy. Mr. President, I waive.
All right, there you go, Senator Elizabeth Warren on what needs to be done. And here now is Yamiche Alcindor, who is now at NBC, talking about Sean Hannity and the role that Fox News has played in all of this.
You can see that this is a committee that is ramping up its work, that's really trying to close in on that inner circle of President Trump, former President Trump, and to really understand sort of who was talking to him and who he really respected enough to sort of weigh their opinion. And Sean Hannity, for anyone who has covered former President Trump, everyone knows that he is someone who was in the president's orbit. They were speaking regularly. The president really took his his sort of advice to heart. It also, in some ways, is a reminder that Fox News, while it's sort of supposed to be a cable news channel, what it really was, and continues to be, is sort of this fringe wing of the GOP, and really the hosts on there, especially the late night opinion hosts on there. They have, in some ways, turned out to be even more powerful than the elected officials that were trying to talk to former President Trump, including Mitch McConnell and others. So this is really, I think, an interesting move. It really shows that they are trying to understand what former President Trump was thinking, what he was telling people at the time. It's very interesting that this is voluntary. We'll see if this, of course, gets to be a sort of subpoena level. It's unclear what goes on there. But it's interesting to me that Sean Hannity is now having to face a difficult decision here, and whether or not he's going to come in and say, here's what the president told me.
All right, rarely do you hear me play anything from Don Lemon, and I'm not a big fan of Don Lemon on CNN, but I am a big fan of Daniel Dale on CNN. He does a fact check on a couple of things that Trump and others have been claiming about January 6th, so I thought I'd play that for you as well.
Bringing now Daniel Dale, he's CNN's fact checker in chief. Daniel, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining. Let's get right to it. One of the biggest false claims from Trump and others is that all the rioters at the Capitol that day were unarmed. Give us the facts.
That's not even close to true, Don. We heard it again from former President Trump in December. Dozens of rioters at the Capitol that day were armed. In fact, so far, according to the Department of Justice last week, more than 75 people who illegally entered Capitol grounds have been charged to date with entering with a deadly or dangerous weapon. Now, that includes at least 4 people accused of bringing guns on Capitol grounds, and that includes things like knives, like batons, like tasers, baseball bats, axes, the list goes on and on. So whether you're using arms to refer specifically to guns or more broadly talking about weapons, the claim is just completely and utterly inaccurate.
Another lie that some supporters of the former president, including some in the right-wing media, love to spread is that the insurrection was a false flag. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this claim is so completely nonsense. It's almost an insult to Americans' intelligence. We know for a fact that this insurrection was orchestrated and perpetrated by supporters of former President Trump. Not only did we see them and hear them that day, the fact that they support Trump has been exhaustively confirmed in their own social media posts, in their own comments to media outlets, and in their own admissions in court. This was not some attack secretly orchestrated by, say, left-wing Antifa to make President Trump look bad. So Trump keeps saying, well, maybe it was Antifa. Antifa was agitating. We have more than 700 people charged to date. Of those more than 700 people, not a single one has been shown to be a member of left-wing Antifa. In contrast, hundreds and hundreds have been proven to be Trump supporters, and a number of them have been confirmed to be affiliated with right-wing extremist groups like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. So no, this is not a false flag. Yes, as we all knew from the start, this was an attack perpetrated by supporters of Trump.
All right, there you go. Daniel Dale fact-checking January 6th for us. He's really great. And I also like this from MSNBC. I love Jamie Raskin. Just love him, of course. Lost his son last year, and he talked about that a little bit. He's written a new book about it. I'm trying to get him on the show. I've reached out to his people. He's been on before. But here he is on MSNBC with Nicole Wallace, and I just thought this is really great. I genuinely like this man, and
I spoke to a senior White House official about the book and about all that you share and are sharing even in this moment. And and they're so protective and private of their relationships with you. But I said, to me, it's service on top of service. It's this extraordinary body of public service in the Congress. And then it's touching this third rail that no matter where you are at this hour in the pandemic, you cannot be untouched by a mental health crisis at this point. And it's so many kids. And I wonder what the reaction has been to putting it out there and being willing to have this conversation about the most dear person to you.
Well, you know, if you turn on some of the news and you look on the internet, you would think that America is just all about violent polarization and mutual hatreds and so on. And that's not been our family's experience. We've had wonderful messages, thousands and thousands of messages from people all over the country, all over the political spectrum, reaching out to us. We've had veterans who have battled mental illness, veterans' families who have lost people to suicide. We've had other families whose kids are going through depression or who have lost kids reach out to us. I mean, there's a lot of pain out there. 800,000 families lost somebody in COVID. We've lost tens and tens of thousands of people recently to gun violence in the country. The mental and emotional health crisis is out of control. The opioid crisis. So this is a country that is in pain. This is a country that's wounded. And the way to deal with trauma is to speak of trauma, for people to be able to express their truths, and to use the trauma as a bonding mechanism so we can connect with other people's pain and other people's loss and then move forward. And I think that's what's going to get us out of it. Otherwise, we're going to get into cycles of pain and cycles of violence and depression, and we don't want that. So for me, I know my wife, Sarah, makes fun of me because I don't distinguish between public life and private life, and that's kind of what you were touching on, too. For me, it's just life. I want life to get better for every American. We can do so much better than we've done over the last few years. All of us can.
You know what's weird listening to Jamie Raskin talk right there is I wonder if anybody that just heard that clip that's listening to this podcast doesn't believe that guy. He strikes me as an extremely genuine person. People are very cynical, and perhaps rightly so, about politicians and Congress in general. But I don't know. I trust that guy. I believe everything that he said. I think he seems like a very authentic, intelligent man who is both intellectually intelligent and emotionally intelligent. And as is the case with a lot of Jewish men I know, he's Jewish. And I don't know. I just think that he is a really genuine guy. That's all I got to say. I like him very much. I believe what he said, and I thought it was inspiring. And I highly recommend that you go learn more about that guy, Jamie Raskin, and I'll keep trying to get him on. Okay, all right, done talking. Let me get now to the news, folks. It is time for a news dump, a recycled old jingle, because somebody who does the voiceovers and jingles for this show decided to take a night off.
Flying bat around the room looking for his lunch. It's sharing all its rabies on today's news dump.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And an oldie but a goodie. And let's get into today's news stories. I think I've got 12 headlines or something there here for you. Let's start with Starbucks unionizing. Unionized Starbucks workers have walked out, citing health concerns. Employees of a Starbucks store in upstate New York, where I grew up, who voted to unionize last month, have walked out the job. Not exactly where I grew up, is in Buffalo. I grew up in Syracuse. Employees of Starbucks store up there who voted to unionize last month walked off the job Wednesday, saying they lacked the staff and resources to work safely amid surging COVID-19 cases. And you know what I say to those Buffalonians? Good for you. 6 employees who had been scheduled to work formed a picket line outside the Buffalo store, leading Starbucks to close it for the day. 3 other employees had remained inside and were called scabs. They weren't. I just made that up. An Uber rider is now facing a $600 bill after hours stuck on I-95. Uber refunded a rider who was billed $600 after he and his driver were stuck on the I-95 for 9 hours during a traffic snarl caused by a winter storm that hit the Mid-Atlantic on Monday morning. And in a related story, being stuck in a car with a complete stranger for 9 hours sounds like a screenplay. Who's with me on that? All right, so this tennis player was not allowed into Australia. Tennis star Novak Djokovic on Wednesday, he was asked to leave Australia just hours after he was denied entry in the country due to an issue with his visa and vaccine requirements. He's like a star tennis player, and he wouldn't get vaccinated. And so the Australians were like, well, then you got to get on the plane and leave. I don't know what to tell you. Sorry about that accent, Campbell, and any other Australian who heard that. Nike has filed a patent infringement lawsuit against Lululemon. Ooh, what is this? Apparently, the apparel company has been accused of patent infringement for its Mirror Gym, an at-home fitness device, in addition to other applications. Oh, wow. We have a similar Mirror Gym as you. More than 1,700 flights are canceled in the U.S. Wednesday, almost 20,000 since Christmas Eve, but Dr. Zatz got out and that's all that matters. We did not hike on Wednesday, but he did go on vacation with his grown daughters, and that makes me happy. Customs and Border Patrol officials said in a statement Tuesday that from October through December, it intercepted a total of $1 million worth of fake championship rings and trophies. What? That's an illicit trade? Yeah, apparently federal authorities in Cincinnati seized 56 shipments worth nearly $1 million in counterfeit championship rings and trophies. Who the hell is buying these trophies? Apparently they represented an assortment of counterfeit championship rings, including the Red Sox, Dodgers, Milwaukee Bucks, and University of Kentucky. I don't know who's buying those or where the market exists for those, but if you're buying somebody else's championship ring, I think you deserve to buy a fake one. How about that? The Boy Scouts of America has failed to win the 75% level of support that it needed, had targeted from men who said they were victims of sexual abuse while in the organization, falling short with 73% according to the Associated Press. What is this? The Boy Scouts of America wanted to get 75% support benchmark as part of a $2.7 billion settlement. $2.7 billion. The Boy Scouts of America plan with the victims plan would pull the Boy Scouts of America out of bankruptcy if it was approved by the courts, but it wasn't, and so they're still fucked. That's too bad. It's an organization that had a lot of good values that apparently didn't practice them. Instagram now has announced it's going to let users switch between chronological and recommended feeds. I don't know what that means, but I think some of you do and some of you care. NASCAR has nixed the Let's Go Brandon car sponsorship. Oh, how brave and noble of them to nix a sponsorship that says literally fuck you to the sitting president. Where can NASCAR pick up its medal for their morality? Chrysler has announced that they're going to be all electric by 2028. How about it? Very excited. The company said Wednesday it's going to launch its first electric vehicle by 2025. They announced their electric plans along with the new AI-enabled vehicle system powered by a battery that can apparently travel up to 400 miles per charge. I'm aroused. And finally, folks, the upcoming Grammy Awards were postponed Wednesday due to what organizers call, quote, too many risks due to the Omicron variant. No new date has been announced. The ceremony's been scheduled for January 31st in L.A. with live audience performances, but they're postponing the ceremony. So if you're looking forward to the Grammys, then you're going to have to wait. And that is the end of today's news dump. Before I get to my guests, I've got to tell you about my sponsor, an amazing organization who, if you haven't donated to yet, what are you waiting for? Because you're giving money to charities because you're a good person. I know you are because you listen to this show. And when you give to charity, you got to wonder how much your impact is gonna actually have. Now, this question can be hard, if not impossible to know, because most charities, they don't tell you how much money, how your money is going to be used or how much good it's going to accomplish. You may know it theoretically is going to help a cause, but how, or more importantly, how much? If you want to help people living in poverty, and you do with evidence-backed, high-impact charities, I am telling you, go to GiveWell. Check out GiveWell right now, GiveWell.org. They spend 20,000 hours a year researching charitable organizations and only recommend a few of the highest impact, evidence-based and backed charities. Evidence-baked? They bake their evidence. No, evidence-backed charities that they found. And here's the best part. GiveWell is free. They want to empower as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about their donations. They publish all their research and recommendations on their site for free, no sign-up required, and they allocate your tax-deductible donation to the charity you choose without taking a cut, which is the most important part. So go to givewell.org/standup right now. Givewell.org/standup right now and find out why the Boston Globe calls GiveWell the gold standard for giving. Givewell.org/standup right now. If you've never donated, GiveWell will match your first donation up to $250. So do it now. Claim your match. GiveWell.org. Pick podcast, enter Stand Up with Pete Dominick at checkout, and make sure they heard that you heard about, and they know that you heard, you know what I'm trying to say about GiveWell from Stand Up with Pete Dominick to have your donation matched. Coming up, I've got the former executive director of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, also the founder of that organization. He's now the founder of Righteous Media and the host of Independent Americans. It's Paul Rieckhoff joining me, and we had a great conversation coming up. But first, before that, I've got the president of the biggest teachers union in Florida, the Florida Education Association, longtime listener and supporter. It never gets old to talk to Andrew Spar and to hear that he is still listening to the show. I love that. Very heartened by it. This guy is one of the most passionate, intelligent, fearless leaders I've ever met in my life. Tons to talk about in terms of education and teachers and COVID, especially as it pertains to one of the most extremely hostile states towards teachers unions in general, and educators and public education in Florida. Andrew Spar is my guest right now. I think you're really going to like our conversation. So let's get after it. That's right. I said it. All right. There he is, the old man himself, because I celebrated his birthday with him in person back in the olden days. It wasn't that long ago, but it seemed like COVID was subsiding. But it's back spiking everywhere in Florida and New York, where we both are. Andrew Spar, welcome back. Great to see you, buddy. Thanks for joining me.
Great seeing you, Pete. Great to be here as always.
So just real quick on when it comes to school potential school closings, can you just help us understand why this is a really difficult decision for administrators and why, frankly, nobody wants this, is my understanding, teachers, administrators, and obviously parents and students. I mean, some students might want it, but the vast majority don't want it, right?
No, look, we found this out for anyone who didn't know this, right? Like all educators knew this, but there were a lot of people before the pandemic who were pushing this idea that we should have kids learning online. Virtual learning is the way of the future. And educators were like, no, it doesn't quite work that way. You need the interaction. And so during the pandemic, when kids were home and parents were pulling their hair out, well, not you and me, but other parents were pulling their hair out, they realized how challenging it was. But what we also realized is that the virtual learning is not the same as being in person, that the best place for kids to learn is actually in school and, in our opinion, in public schools. And so what we want to do is keep the learning going. And so what's been very frustrating for everyone, right? I don't think there's anyone who's not frustrated with the fact that we keep having to deal with these surges of COVID, right? Like every few months, we got another surge of COVID and it impacts everything. But what we're seeing with the Omicron virus strand of COVID is that it's spreading so fast. It's impacting so many people. There are like, Miami-Dade County, for example, they had tens of thousands of students out yesterday, their first day back, right? Tens of thousands of students. And they had thousands of teachers, like almost 2,000 teachers and staff out because they've been exposed or had COVID or something like that. And so that's disruptive in the learning process. And when you look at across this country, massive teacher and staff shortages because of how public education has been maligned, the lack of funding. If you now have a very high percentage, 10%, 15% of staff out, it could very well impact the ability for the whole system. How are kids getting to school if you have a bunch of bus drivers out and you are already short-staffed? How are you going to cover classrooms if you have a bunch of teachers out and you are already short-staffed? How are you going to feed kids in the cafeteria if you have a cafeteria staff depleted with staff because of absences? So that's what's creating, I think, a lot of the stress and angst right now in the system is that we just have a virus. Look, it's not just related to public education, right, or our schools. We've seen it in the airline industry. How many people got stranded coming back from, their ski trip or going down to the Caribbean or wherever it was during the holidays, because airlines are having a problem staffing planes right now because of COVID. So it's very frustrating for everyone. And we know that kids need to be in school. I shared this in an interview the other day, but look at second graders right now, right? If a child is in second grade, they have yet to have a normal school year. They were in kindergarten when COVID shut things down in March of 2020. They were in first grade last year when there were still virtual options and there was a lot of up and down in the system. And they are in second grade this year, which started a school year with a surge in COVID. And now here we are in the middle of the school year with another surge in COVID. This is impacting our students in a big way. And we all want to see normalcy.
All well said. Yeah. Like it's obviously a nuanced issue, but it's not how it's playing out on social media. It's not how it's playing out on cable news. It's not how it's playing out on my community's Facebook page, where I'm arguing with my neighbors and folks where, my daughter's school district is, because they're screaming and shouting about the fact that this isn't that dangerous. And if they would stop testing, you wouldn't get these positive results. And I don't know. There aren't really any good arguments. But what is the point of view of teachers and educators right now in this latest wave? Randy Weingarten, of course, has been out in national media. You've been out talking all over the place, trying to represent, obviously, the interests of educators. But what are the concerns right now with vaccination, with mandates, with testing, with masks, all of it? And not that everybody agrees.
Yeah, look, there's obviously lots of disagreement. In Florida, the legislature and the governor passed laws that limit what school districts can do. But I want to remind everyone, every year we hear about schools across this nation having to shut down because of a flu outbreak and so many kids getting sick, and they want to try to contain it and get ahead of it. Schools have said forever, even when you and I were in school back in the dark ages, right? It was always, if someone is sick, stay home. Like, don't bring chickenpox to school. We don't talk about chickenpox now because guess what? There's a vaccine that's kind of like eradicated chickenpox. So it's not such a big deal anymore. But chickenpox was a big thing. And if there was a school that had an outbreak of chickenpox, it wasn't unheard of that they might shut down or try to quarantine people to get the chickenpox from spreading out of the school. So, this is not new in that sense. But what's new, if you will, with this is, one, none of us have ever lived through a pandemic. But two, I think people are frustrated, right? There's the burnout from the pandemic, from the fact that, gosh, this is now going into year 3 of having to deal with all of this disruption in our daily lives and the impact that it's having on our mental state, it's having on our students. And again, what educators want is we want normalcy. So, we can talk about the fact that if everyone had gotten vaccinated early on, maybe we wouldn't be dealing with the situation we're dealing with right now. If we had mask mandates in place and if we work together as a community to try to prevent the spread of COVID in the first place, maybe we wouldn't be dealing with this surge that we're dealing with now. But I think what you're hearing, and I listened to your show the other day, and you had Dr. Kaplan, is that who it was, on? And again, even there, he was saying this is probably something we're going to have to live with forever, right? Like, this may become a routine kind of thing. So we got to figure it out. There's no question about that. And sure, it seems like Omicron is not as serious, but we are seeing hospitalizations increase, and we're seeing it with kids, by the way, which is concerning. And look, the bottom line is we've got to figure out what are we going to do as a community to address the health issues so we can keep the education system going the way it needs to.
It's hard enough for teachers and educators and schools in states where unions are strong and organized, and I think progressive states that don't demonize government and public education as much. You're at ground zero in Florida, president of the biggest teachers union there, and you're having to constantly deal with a Republican legislature and a governor who a lot of people see as someone who's going to take over where Trump left off or maybe is. The craziest thing in your weird, upside down, bizarro state is that as educators and in schools, you're literally being prevented from doing the easiest and safest things, which wouldn't be the case with any other issue, like if your school had a pool or archery or all kinds of fire hazards. And of course, all of the live shooter drills. What has been the hardest or the most ridiculous thing that you've had to deal with there in Florida just to keep the people in the buildings safe?
I think what we hear from a lot of our members, a lot of teachers, and we see it even from parents, is, they keep talking about this idea of parent rights. And what people talk about is, the question here, I think, is where does your rights as a parent infringe on my rights as a parent? Right. And I think some of that gets lost in this. And in Florida, we're dealing with it not just with the mask mandates, right? Because there's the whole idea of, if I want my child to be healthy and safe, and I send my child to school in a mask, they're saying, well, that's your right. You can't force my child to wear a mask. Okay, but then your child can come to school and infect my child because they're not wearing a mask. And how is that right? And so I think that's kind of where the argument comes into play. What our governor has said is Florida is the state of freedom. But there are a lot of people who are saying, but is it my freedom or is it only your freedom? You know, in that whole conversation. And so
the best equivalent, by the way, I can't believe I haven't heard this. I thought it was the best equivalent to be a high school football team or a junior high football team where one or a couple of parents are like, you cannot force my child to wear a helmet. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, except that they can be, and they are, because the rules require it.
But it'd be such a dumb thing. It'd be such a dumb thing to prevent your child from. You can't force my kid to wear a seatbelt. All right.
Yeah. Look, we've all seen, you know, the whole thing about, you know, I think what people miss in this, and I think you've touched on it several times on your show. With personal freedom comes personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. Like our country wasn't founded on the notion of your freedoms override anyone else's freedoms, or that your freedoms don't come without responsibility. Like there is responsibility. There's responsibility to the community. There's responsibility to your family. There's responsibility to yourself. So I do think there's an element of responsibility in all of this. Look, some of the craziest stuff I've seen. Look, we've got book bans going on now in Florida too, right? Like because you know this whole issue. Our state Department of Education took down a whole page on the Department of Education's website that talked about students who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, and that were resources that teachers could have to help students in that area. We have one school where a parent threw a fit that in the library was a book about a student who was LGBTQ plus, you know, and that book should come out of the library. Again, this is the kind of thing where that's not about parent rights in my thought process, right? Because right now in Florida, right, like any parent can say, I don't want my kid reading Catcher in the Rye. And the school has a process for them to get an alternative assignment so that their child doesn't read Catcher in the Rye. That's a parental right. But saying, and I don't want any other kid to read it either, is not a parental right at that point. That's now violating the rights of others. And that's what this has happened with an LGBTQ book that was banned. There's another book about race that was banned. You know, Florida's got this whole conversation around critical race theory. And I want to say, because I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it, because at the end of the day, what we're seeing is really trying to get us to chase them down a rabbit hole, right? Because CRT is not taught in our schools. History and facts are taught in our schools. And what I've said to a lot of people, because especially with Republicans, members of ours who are Republican and others who I've talked to, you know, we do a lot in this country. They compare our education system to the world. And they say, you know, Florida's or the United States doesn't do as well when you look at the rest of the world in math. And we're behind in math. We do okay in reading. We do okay in writing, but we're behind in math. And we just look at the test scores. And we say, we want to be like those other countries that do really well. But have we ever talked to those other countries? Because some people have, like through the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, two of our national unions, they talk with these other countries. You know what these other countries ask about the United States? They ask us, how do you teach entrepreneurship? How do you teach ingenuity? How do you teach creative thinking and problem solving? Because guess what? No one does it better than the United States. And so instead of impugning the United States education system, why don't we lift up the fact that the United States actually produces more entrepreneurs than anywhere else in the world, right? And we do it through our public schools. And we should lift that up. And we do it because we actually do teach people to think critically. We do teach people to look at the facts and examine things. And while we are not a perfect nation by any stretch of the imagination, we do amazing things because we believe in the foundation of a public education system. And that's what's under attack, quite honestly. It's the American way that's under attack.
Yep.
When there's an attack on public schools.
And you've been at the forefront of defending that for your entire career, all the way up to where you are at now. And we're so glad that you're in the position you are, because you're the perfect leader for our time. And I think everybody knows that about you. And I'm always inspired every time I speak to you on or off the air. But you also know that this is all a strategy. And as you just kind of laid it out for us in terms of the books that they're getting rid of, CRT, they're using the language now. Your governor said when they say equity, they mean this. They're taking over words. They're changing words. They say when When they say diversity, equity, inclusion, they're talking about CRT. They're literally deleting categories of people and getting rid of the safe spaces that have been so hard fought to win, as well as the officers who are there to carry them out, which up until recently wasn't that controversial when my mom was a city school teacher, to make sure that the kids with learning disabilities were included. That was part of DEI. It's not just race and ethnicity. It's so many other things. And yet they're taking that language. How do we fight back, boss?
Well, look, there's a couple of things, right? Messaging matters, and talking about the issues matters, and calling it out matters, right? So this idea of not being able to talk about equity, this idea of not being able to talk about inclusion, right? That, which is what we've heard here in Florida, and we've seen some other states, with similar kinds of approaches. But the reality of it is, we owe every child in this country not just access or an opportunity. We owe them an education, regardless of race, regardless of background, regardless of zip code, and regardless of ability. And listen, I've added in the ability piece because some of the most ignored students in America are students with disabilities. Are students with disabilities. And that's not right. That's not fair. And that's not what we should do. That's why you have the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? That is why we have IDEA, which is the individual education plans, right? Because we need to make sure that every child gets the education they deserve. And guess what? The only place where that happens is in our public schools. Charter schools don't do it. Private schools don't do it. Public schools make sure that every child gets it. And we're not perfect, but we have to invest in the future. With everything that's going on right now, massive teacher shortages, massive staff shortages, COVID and school closings and people being out and all of this kind of stuff, we are on the cusp of losing an entire generation. It's that important what we do. And the only way we stop it is, someone said this, and I thought this was a great thing. You mentioned it, your school board, other school boards, there have been these people who have been, they're very hostile to public education. They're hostile individuals. And these individuals, someone asked the question, aren't there more of them? And the response, this wasn't me who did this, someone else gave them, was there aren't more of them. They're just louder now and better organized. And the best way for us to defeat that is to be louder and better organized. Because at the end of the day, the majority of Americans believe in their public schools. The majority of Americans believe children should be taught factual information and the complete history. And the majority, overwhelming, right? Like overwhelming majority of Americans believe every child should get that education they deserve, regardless of race, background, or zip code. And that's what we should be all focused on. And we shouldn't chase down every rabbit hole. We should come back to, how are we educating our kids? What are we doing for our kids? This isn't about your child. This is about all children. This isn't about your right to prevent other kids from getting what they need. This is about making sure that every child is getting what they need. So that's what we've got to do.
Well, I would disagree. I'm mainly concerned with my girls, not your girls.
But listen, but even as concerned with your girls, don't you want your girls to grow up where they understand different points of views, where they're able to articulate what we should be doing, where they realize they're part of a broader community? I think most parents do think that.
It's so crazy that people are saying they're forcing their agenda down our throat. It's just not what happens in schools. You can cherry pick some teacher. You can find some viral video of a teacher doing it. You certainly can. But everybody knows that it would make no sense for a teacher to do that. And most teachers know, whether it be English or history, where there are different, things to teach as opposed to math. I don't think anybody's saying you're forcing algebra down our throat, although I'm not sure how necessary it is. But the point is, they're teaching them to debate and discuss different economic systems, different points of view on all. They have to defend things that they would never even want to defend. That's what our kids are learning in school. That's what the teachers are teaching them how to think, period. Not always perfectly. Not every teacher is the best, but that's always been the point. And it's a rare exception that doesn't do that makes it somehow about their own point of view on things. And if you don't know that, it's because you don't know any fucking teachers. Forgive me. I'm sorry. I got carried away. I'm sorry. Sorry.
But look, and I agree, Pete, and I'll say this. If you think about it, history, there's two things that are going to happen with history, right? We're either going to, it's an old cliche saying, right? We're either going to learn from our history or we're destined to repeat it. But here's the thing. In history, there are two things we should do. We should celebrate the amazing accomplishments we've made as a society in history, and we should learn from the mistakes we've made in history.
Yep.
And everyone should do that. Like, to me personally, I actually believe that. Like, in my own life, I look back on decisions I've made along the way. There are decisions I have learned from, and there are decisions I have celebrated. And that's what we need to do. You know, we have to learn about the Holocaust. We have to learn about slavery. We have to learn about the civil rights movement and the Jim Crow era. And we have to celebrate the successes we've had. And we have to learn from the mistakes that we've made as a country, as a people, as a world, because that's what we should, that's how we make sure we have a better future.
Well, what would you say to my white daughters who, when they learn some of these things, they feel bad and guilty about who they are as whites? They also feel lesser than. What would you say to them?
You know, look, I don't think anyone should ever feel guilty for who they are. But what we should do is we should acknowledge that as white individuals, especially bald white guys, we get certain privileges in society, in systems. And that privileges isn't meant that we should impugn others or that we should be upset about that. We should recognize it and work to make sure that everyone gets the same privileges. At the end of the day, what we should do is we should lift everyone up, and we should give everyone what they need to be successful. And for me, it's an education, right? Public education is the great equalizer of our time. Everyone in history has talked about the importance of a great education, right? And public education, by the way, should be a nonpartisan issue. This is a nonpartisan issue. This is an issue that focuses on our future as a country, our future as individuals, and success for all. And the best way to make that happen, the best way to break poverty out, is to make sure that every child gets what they need. And that's where equity comes in, by the way. Because I look at Florida, and you can look anywhere in the United States. Look at kids who are struggling. Look at schools that are struggling. What is the commonality almost always with that? Poverty. Poverty. Like Florida, 50% of third graders aren't reading on grade level in Florida. Where are most of those kids? They're at schools in poverty. They live in poverty. So why don't we address poverty? Because if we address poverty and how we teach kids in poverty, and then they become kids who excel and succeed in school, they will not be in poverty anymore. They will have the ability to get out and break the cycle. And people do. Like, we know people break the cycle of poverty. And how do they do it? They always do it through public education. They always do it through their schools. And so we have the opportunity to make this country even greater by investing in that and by thinking differently. And quite honestly, what we're pushing here in Florida, we're about to start the legislative session here in Florida. Our lawmakers go back to work next Tuesday, and they have a 60-day legislative session. There's going to be a lot of issues. What we continue to push is we need lawmakers to address teacher and staff shortages. They have to address pay. They have to address equity within pay. They have to address the empowering our educators to do the jobs they need to do. And if we do that, we can deal with the issues of kids who are struggling. We can deal with the issues of making sure every child has a great teacher in front of them and the support staff there to help them succeed. But if we chase down rabbit holes that are meant to distract us off that mission, then we'll never accomplish what we need to do for our kids.
All right, dude, you're just so inspiring to hear you talk about the message and know that you're on the case dealing with it. I know how challenging it is every day, and I appreciate you giving us some of your time. I always learn a lot from you. Thank you so much, Andrew Spar.
Absolutely, Pete. Have a great one. Happy New Year.
All right, there you go. Andrew Spar, Florida Education Association. Follow him on Twitter at Andrew Spar, FEA, everybody, and check out the work that he and so many other amazing Florida educators are doing in spite of a constant daily hostile threat from Republican legislature and conservative government, who is always attacking public education and organized labor. Love talking to Andrew Spar. So inspiring, so great. Please let him know that you heard him here on the show. And now it's time to get to my second guest of the show. He is the former executive director of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. He is an Iraq combat veteran where he was a platoon leader, wrote an amazing book about his time there, by the way, called Chasing Ghosts. And he's now a media guy. You've seen him on MSNBC a lot, CNN a lot, always an advocate for veterans and so much more. I love talking to him. We always talk parenting, which is what we did here. The first 20 minutes, we were just having a fun conversation about parenting, and then it gets pretty serious and important with my conversation with Paul Rieckhoff, who you should listen to his podcast, Independent Americans. Support everything that he is doing. He's always been so supportive of everything that I'm doing. He is on Twitter at Paul Rieckhoff. The links to all of his information in the show notes. Let's do it. Oh, by the way, when he joined me in the video chat, he was wearing a ski helmet and goggles. And so we start just laughing at that.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Oh, you think there's going to be some kind of combat? You worried about injury?
2022 is nuts. I'm ready. I'm coming prepared.
This is for the whole year.
Yes. Are we recording?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Well, I'm wearing a helmet to all interviews from now on. I might just wear it all the time just so I'm ready.
Helmet and goggles. So basically, you could be ready for anything from jumping out of an airplane to skiing to a riot.
To a lunatic with bear mace.
Sure.
Right?
I don't know.
Right?
Actually, I think the bear mace would get to your nose. You might want to wear a mask.
That's true.
You really, go all the way with safety equipment. A lot of Americans think that their freedom is being stolen by having to wear a cloth mask. But Paul Rieckhoff will, helmet, goggles, mask, whatever it takes to survive and live to fight another day, apparently.
If I get stuck on I-95 in a snowstorm, I am not fucking dying. I am not freaking... You know how much shit I have in my truck? Like, I have duct tape, I have tourniquets, I have tons of Kodiak granola bars, I have diapers, baby wipes galore, water, what else? Flares.
My understanding is that you have live living organs in a cooler just in case you need to transplant surgery during...
I actually just threw out a cooler, which I don't know what to do with because my mother sent me Omaha steaks for Christmas, which was a great gift. Like, who doesn't love bacon wrapped filet mignon, right?
That's a nice gift. It is. I did an ad read for a company, like a meat company, Moink Box, to try them out.
Great. I'm all down anything that comes in a box that doesn't suck. So, yeah. Well, especially since we're going to be buried in like 15 feet of snow any day now. So, that's great. My mother is proactive. My mother is staying vigilant.
How much of that coverage did you watch of the people stuck? How many of those stories did you read about, hear about? And are you really, prepared for, you have like a kit in your truck? Car?
Yeah, we definitely have first aid kits in every vehicle. That's and a heating blanket and some other basic stuff.
Oh, wow.
What's that? Yeah, my wife is like sometimes a little bit more casual about it, but just the other day I put it in there. It also comes in handy if you have to like put something on the car or if you don't want to get like a messy pumpkin that we painted all over the car. You can drop that in the back. It's kind of a drop cloth, right? And by the way, my kids puke all the time.
Yeah.
So, Christmas Eve, I shared this on my show. My son swallowed a car. And we thought it was a metal car, so we had to rush him to the ER on Christmas Eve. I did by myself because my wife had COVID. And I was doing 95 in the rain with him projectile vomiting on me from behind from the car seat the entire time. And you know where you really want to be on Christmas Eve? A rural emergency room during the Omicron outbreak. That's really where you want to be on Christmas Eve.
What did he... Why did he eat a car?
So, like about an hour before, by the way, my wife, I think, as my listeners know, got COVID like 4 days before Christmas. So we had a COVID Christmas. She was isolating, but we always adapt, improvise, and overcome. Like an hour before then, he's only 2.5. He said, "Daddy, I ate a con," and I was like, "Oh, you ate a con?" And he's like, "Yeah, I ate a con," and I was like, "Oh, I thought he ate popcorn from like 2 days ago that had been on the carpet somewhere." And I said, okay, no big deal. And then I went out for an hour to go to Walmart to pick up a Power Wheels that I didn't get a chance to get for my son because my wife had COVID. And Lauren said, come back. River swallowed a car. And I said, call Poison Control immediately. And Poison Control said, just to be safe, in case it's a metal car, has a battery in it, bring him to the emergency room. So by the time, this is no shit. It was crazy. He was puking from the moment he got in the car, and where we live is kind of isolated. It took 35 minutes to get to the ER, and he was puking for most of it. but he stayed conscious. And at some point, I think right before we went in the ER, he must have puked out the car, which was actually a train. He confused a train with a car, but it was still a little tiny thing, but it was plastic, not metal. And then, Christmas Eve was really between being in an ER with a bunch of people who had COVID, picking through puke to see if there was a car, and then, of course, picking through diapers for 3 days to see if the car came out. So how was your Christmas, Pete?
Well, what is it? Overcome? Adapt? What is the phrase?
Adapt, improvise, and overcome. I'm going to take this off because it doesn't
Taking
help
off the helmet and the goggles. Paul Rieckhoff joining us for the first time in far too long. It's great to see you. My Christmas is a lot less eventful than yours, and nobody got sick yet. But, of course, I'm anticipating it. We're all anticipating it. And so how bad has it been for your wife?
I think it was more mild symptoms, flu-like. So she was really tired. Yeah. She had a fever for a day or two. I think it was just kind of demoralizing for the whole family because we were all going to get together at my brother's house for the first time in 2 years. Oh. But we had some folks who were high risk, and we were all trying to be careful. So, it sucked a bit. I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah. I mean, we're not bulletproof emotionally, but we made the most of it. And the kids and I amazingly didn't get it. And we, made the most out of Christmas, and we're thankful. I mean, she got out of it okay. She had about, she was tired. She's still a little tired. And, got some lingering effects. But for at least from our experience, she got Omicron in the city when everybody got it. Mm-hmm. And half of New York City seems to have it right now. And it hit right before Christmas. But we made the most of it, man. We're thankful. There are a lot of people who had an empty seat at their Christmas table this year. And, we count our blessings.
So a lot of things, issues, news stories, January 6th related stuff I want to talk with you about. But we always do a little parenting, you and I. And so we've already heard, obviously, about how your child eats a lot of toys. I feel like this is not the first time your child has eaten, and I specifically think it was a vehicle. He seems to eat a lot of. Have you thought about like a future career and maybe the Department of Transportation, or maybe he wants to be a choo-choo? Has he visited a train? Why did he eat a train?
Well, I don't know. Everything kind of looks like candy, and he watches things like Cookie Monster. I mean,
am I right? Am I right that I have heard you say that this child has eaten toys before?
The boy is hungry. My boys are big. They're like upper, was it 99th percentile in height and weight. They're like baby JJ Watts. They're enormous, and they eat a shitload. Yeah. And they sometimes just eat anything that fits in their mouth. And my son, in his defense, it was kind of like a translucent train thing that kind of looked like a lollipop or a gummy bear. Uh-huh. And when you want gummy bears or fruit snacks all the time, I think every kid probably is addicted to fruit snacks if you let him be. It kind of looked like a fruit snack in his defense.
Is it true that your son also likes you to tie a tube sock up in a knot and like play tug of war? Is there any chance your son might be part terrier?
He's entirely possible.
He is eating.
There's definitely wolf blood in there. Where we live now, there's a mountainside like a couple 100 meters away that's covered with coyotes. Mm-hmm. And I think he kind of peeks his head up and feels a little bit of a call to wild thing. Right. He's going to get naked and run out in the woods, and it'll be better than the schooling he's getting right now with this virtual shit. I'd rather leave him with some wolves for a couple weeks.
Well, let me ask you. This is my thing. Let's talk about the school thing. I don't know if there's any argument to be had here, but everybody hates virtual school. Everybody, the kids, the parents, the teachers, the school. No one likes it. No one wants it. And we can always debate and discuss, when it should be in effect, for how long, and so on. But the argument I've been making is, if there are not enough adults to run the school, then either there's no school at all or no virtual school, anything. So it's like, it's frustrating and it stinks. But are you kind of laying blame on anybody for the decisions that they've made here, outside of people who haven't, been responsible about getting vaccinated, et cetera?
Look, first off, I mean, your point is correct. Anybody knows this has been in the military. If a bunch of people get sick, things stop happening, right? It could be dental problems. It could be toxin exposures. It could be the flu. So, that is almost like it's a casualty rate, right? And here's the thing. In this environment, we should be able to project it a little bit better. And that's where I do lay some blame is, for example, our school, which we will not identify, didn't tell us till 8:30 last night that we were going virtual today. Now that, failing to plan is planning to fail. I think that everybody can be more proactive in having contingencies, and that's what I look for. I have tremendous support and sympathy for everybody in the educational world, and I'm actually going to throw you a positive. Virtual school for me is a good chance to watch my kids learn.
I agree with that.
I like watching the teachers and checking on them and see who's good, who understands my kid, who doesn't.
For me, it's a good chance to watch my teenage daughters cheat. I mean, that's what teens, all of them. It's not like your kid didn't do it, by the way. Your kid who's getting at Ivy League school was definitely and talking to their friends. That was what we watched.
My kid is no longer getting into a little Ivy school because my Ivy League school has gotten rid of legacy admissions. So after all my cycle breaking, that shit don't matter no more. So first in my family to go to college, Amherst College just slammed that door behind me and said, "Too bad, little Rieckhoff isn't getting in unless he's a concert pianist."
It's not helping that you're so public about the fact that your son eats toys constantly. Like Amherst may have heard about, they may have seen that tweet or heard that episode of your podcast too. But like, listen, we draw the line. If it doesn't look like he's going to outgrow this. He's going to be like 16, and you're going to be like, please put down that car.
Like cars, I'm just hoping he doesn't eat any weed I have laying around the house or anything else.
Oh,
man.
I can't believe he hasn't gotten to that yet. You got to be careful.
Dude, that shit's in a lockbox just in case because this kid eats everything. This is a real risk. If you have edibles around your house, you better be damn careful. Like I know we talk about sugar locks, which I am also a big supporter of.
Sure.
And actually, in all seriousness, something I've been training my kids on already is just being aware of firearms. Like we don't have toy guns in my house. That's my rule. But we do have an understanding of what to do if Johnny's dad leaves a gun out when you're playing on a play date. But similarly, like if you're into edibles, which a lot of people are now, and they seem to be everywhere and delicious and robust, lock those shits up because if my kid's over for a play date, he might eat all of them.
That's also a concern because I know that your son was at another kid's house playing and your son ate the stock of a toy M16. So we know that the danger is not that he could, just playing with a gun. He might eat the wooden end of it. So it's
maybe he's the next Joey Chestnut, the guy who wins the hot dog eating contest.
I didn't think about the edibles. Like I didn't have them around when the girls were little because they weren't as available. That's the only reason. But now, I mean, I had every other kind of.
Now you just give it to them before they go to class, and then they're focused, right?
Now they're teenagers, and we just want them to, excel and compete. So whatever drugs it takes, of course, we want our kids to be the best and the brightest.
So what's going to be your rule when your kids turn 18?
Yeah,
are you going to be supportive if they want to enjoy recreational?
Oh, it's
cannabis?
already we're there, buddy. We're there.
Yeah,
we're already there. I mean, I won't betray, what's been done to my. I'll tell you when I hit stop, but I mean, it's a wide open conversation, and they've known that I partook since they were younger because I'm as honest as I possibly can be with them, because the idea of them finding out that I'm something that I'm not is my biggest concern. The moment they see me sneak in a puff is the moment that everything else they've ever role modeled or said to them is also questionable. It's bad enough that I let them down the trail, the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. They're critical thinkers, so they see me puffing, they're gonna be like, "Daddy smokes." So I told them, and we've talked about it. And my secret is I didn't drink or do any drugs until I was in my early 20s, and didn't smoke weed till I was like 25. So I actually didn't do it when I was their age. Guess what doesn't matter? That.
Yeah, it's a brave new world, man. Well, you're a good dad. And I just want to send love and support to all the parents out there, especially the parents with little children.
Yeah.
I've said it before. There's a couple things that I don't think you understand unless you experience them. And one of them is combat. The other is being a parent. And the other is a pandemic. And the last 2 years has kind of felt like all three combined. So especially if you've got little ones, it's challenging. And I just want to send love and understanding and support to all of you. And we're all in this together. And if you know somebody with a little kid, they need probably two things: money and childcare. Everything else, they would love to have you. Well, that other shit, you want to help. Hey, money, childcare. Everything else is fucking secondary.
I actually I thought you were going to say, if you know somebody with a kid, I guess this would be kind of weird, but it was my instinct. It's like, what they need is time away from that kid every once in a while, a break. maybe
childcare. Yeah,
I was never really, but for a whole shift. But I was just thinking like, be nice to just be like, hey, I'll watch your kids for a while, but that might be also creepy.
An hour.
Sure.
I mean, there are times, when Lauren and I, didn't have a break. We got one in diapers, and I got friends who have 3 kids. I met a guy the other day who had 9 kids. I was like, shit, Jesus. That guy hasn't slept in like 2 decades.
Were you buying a shed from an Amish?
This is no shit. I
Orthodox
met him at the playground.
Jewish? Come on, explain this.
I met him at the play. I've met him before, and I see him at the playground. He has a mohawk ponytail and lives with all these children in a converted school bus. Like it's some kind of school bus camper shit. It's some crazy country shit.
And you didn't. You're telling me you didn't immediately ask him to come on your podcast? That was the only thing.
I don't think he has any time, man. He'd be okay if he got stuck on 95. I tell you that guy would be fucking fine.
Do you think it would be weird? Do you think it's weird if a white bald guy walks up to kids at a playground and says, "Hey, you know what? It's probably stressful. Let me watch your kids for a few hours."
I don't. Yeah. You know what? At this point, if anybody offered to watch my kids, I'd be like, all right, I'll be right back.
You run back. Keep them away from Matchbox cars. I'll be right back.
That's it, man.
Let's talk about where we're at. January 6th, 1 year on. I know you wanted to talk about that. I want to talk about that with everybody. It's one of those events in times in history that everybody remembers where they were and has a unique perspective on it to some extent. Yours, obviously, is one I wanted to get because of who you are, your background, your advocacy, your wide breadth of understanding about a wide, different demographics of people and why they do what they do and so on, not to mention politics. And so, how do we get into this? How do you feel 1 year later about what happened that day?
It's the number one national security threat facing America. It's the most important national security moment since 9/11. Maybe more important. And right now it has transitioned to what I and maybe others have called the American insurgency. There's been a lot of talk about civil war, and I think that might be the wrong construct. Jason Dempsey's been on my podcast, Admiral Stavridis, a lot of folks that are much smarter than I am. And I think what we're seeing now is an insurgency. And specifically, January 6th was kind of like a crowning achievement. It was the time of the martyr with Ashley Babbitt, and you had this spectacular rally cry. That's a great recruiting event, right? It was a win for those who want to do that. And now, as targets get hardened, they move on down the line. So I was actually anticipating talking to you. The new target, in my view, for what I call the American insurgency is those school board meetings you're going to all the time, Pete. Yeah. Like you are in the line of fire at your local school board meeting more than if you worked at the Capitol. And that's where, not necessarily coordinated, and that's why it's important. Similar to Al-Qaeda or any other extremist ideology, it doesn't have to be orders from anybody. It can be a crazy person. It can be a fanatic. It can be an isolated loner who just feels some kind of connection to this larger thing and gets pissed off one day and maybe drinks too much or gets in a fight with his wife. And, the old Johnny Cash song, "Don't take your guns to town." He takes his gun or he takes his knife and he goes to your school board meeting. That is the soft target. And that is now, we've seen this, Scott McFarlane and others have been reporting, there is communication, there is deliberate coordination on some level to move down to state capitals, local capitals. And I think the new war against extremism, the battlefield is your local school board meeting. Well, they're already there and they're coming, and they're not even people with kids. They're people who are looking for a fight, who are looking for a stage, who want to be a mini Steve Bannon. And if a guy like Pete Dominick with a radio show also happens to be there, the podcast, they're going to be all over it.
Yeah, I'd be proud to be an early casualty and go down as a martyr in that fight because
don't even fuck around, man. Well, seriously, I'm careful about that.
I'm saying because if there is a civil war and if it's only going to get worse, take me down early. But let me play my role. I'm not worried. I'm not worried about what you just said. I absolutely think it's a possibility. But I wouldn't say that they don't have kids. A lot of these people do have kids, certainly in my community. But you're right. Some of them don't, and they just get involved and they want to scream and yell. Certainly on the Facebook pages. But that's why I think it's important for people to step up, whoever you are, whatever. You don't have to say. By the way, you don't have to say something at a microphone. If you just show up, the board sees that you have a lot of people there. You know, in our town, we have T-shirts. We want the board to see how many of us are concerned and feel the way that we do about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it's not tough to organize, you know, and get involved. So, and I just think that everybody has to. People think, oh, what do I offer? You just need a body and a face on a screen at a Zoom with your congressman.
I totally agree with that, but it's also a security situation. And you don't have metal detectors at those things. You're not screening anybody. Anybody can walk right in. And this is after being in a place like Iraq, where everything is a soft target. Every wedding, every line outside of a hospital, every gathering of people, right, is a soft target. And I saw them get hit, and I saw the casualties, and we dealt with that for almost a year. That's where my mind goes, is to a security situation. So yes, of course, people should organize and people should be vigilant. But at the same time, you have to be realistic about the security threat environment and be smart. Right?
That's why the National Association of Boards of Education wrote a letter to the Department of Justice, said, we're concerned about the board meetings in our communities. Can you do anything? The Department of Justice says, basically writes back and puts out a memo saying, we got it. We appreciate it. We'll watch. That's our job as Department of Justice. And then the right, Hannity and Tom Cotton and the rest, say that the Department of Justice is calling parents terrorists for exercising their free speech. That's what happens. Yeah. That's what's happened as a result of the concerns about security at these board meetings.
But it's a new normal, right? If you would have said 20 years ago, we're going to have locks on all the doors in schools, and we're going to have cops in schools, and we're going to have metal detectors, and we're going to teach teachers how to do crisis response plans if there was a shooter, that would have seemed extreme. It would have seemed dramatic. After the rash of school shootings we've seen over the last few decades, it's now a new normal. This I sadly think and predict will become a new normal, where targets will have to be hardened. And it happens at football games. It happens everywhere else. It's going to be a part of our new normal, where the threat is from within, and the domestic, American insurgency is the number one national security threat. It's not Putin. It's not North Korea. Our children are more likely to get hurt by a dude at the supermarket than they are by a missile from Kim Jong-un.
Well, I within that, the community that I'm most concerned about are the communities that you've been members of, active duty, former military, but even more specifically, law enforcement. In my town, when we talk about these issues, overwhelmingly folks who are members of law enforcement, related to members of law enforcement, spouses of, et cetera, they're on the side of the room screaming about CRT. They're the ones enforcing the actual law. I mean, it's terrifying to think how the ideology of extremism is playing out in the law enforcement community and in active duty military. So take me back to January 6th. You've been talking about this on your show and everywhere else about how many in the active duty and former veterans community are radicalized with these ideologies of extremism, white supremacy, anti-government, all of it.
So on my show that drops on Thursday, I guess it is January 6th, I've got an exclusive with Noah Shackman, the editor of Rolling Stone, right?
Awesome, yeah.
And Rolling Stone's been reporting on this. He's got a new story coming that he teases on my show this week, and will drop either tomorrow or Friday, that digs into this issue specifically. And his thesis is going to be that involvement, at least on January 6th, of military personnel may be overblown by the military. But by the media, maybe overblown by the national conversation. It may be exaggerated. Now, his piece is going to drop. We can dig into it, see what he's got. But I will tell you this, no matter what his piece says, the threat is real, because these are uniquely dangerous people. We're trained to be dangerous. We're trained to organize. We have an understanding of weapons and tactics and coordination that is different than the average bear. And we are also being recruited, right? We are a high value recruit for the Oath Keepers, for Donald Trump. And that includes everybody from Johnny, who just got out of the 82nd Airborne, to Mike Flynn. Every extremist movement since the beginning of time has prioritized the recruitment of former military people, right? I mean, from the Roman days, right? This is what you do if you want to go to war. You get the people who know about war. So I think it's important. I think there has to be a cleansing and a total reorientation within the military. I keep bringing up this example. A couple months ago, a guy was arrested at Fort Bragg, who was assigned to Fort Bragg, I think it was late summer, who had been a participant in the January 6th insurrection. He had been there, and he made it through all the screenings. He joined the military, and he was assigned to Fort Bragg 6-7 months afterward. We still haven't caught all the people from January 6th. I think this is an important point. The bomber, the package bomber, right, who put bombs outside of the RNC and DNC 1 year ago, is still at large, right? Yeah, still at large. Yes, still at large. Right? The FBI, you want to do something good for your country, go to the FBI webpage and retweet and share the 15 or 20 videos they've got of people who attacked our Capitol who are still at large. So I think the threat is real. The threat within the military is unique and important. I think Secretary Austin has tackled it, but he's making up for 15 years of lost time. And it's a real problem. How big of a problem? I don't know. But how many, Army Rangers does it take to paralyze a city? Right? Not too many. I mean, remember the DC sniper? One guy could paralyze a city for a long time. So we've got to be vigilant and we've got to provide alternatives. And I think that's the downstream stuff that doesn't get enough thought. How do you get a person before they're radicalized? How does the infrastructure plan from Biden get someone a job and make them a part of the future instead of making them lonely and isolated and hating the government and watching Fox News all day? Like, we got to get them upstream further before they become radicalized. And I don't think enough of the discussion is happening around there, because some people, when they're radicalized, they're gone. You're never going to get to them, right? You got to have that hardened security and think about prevention measures. But we have to think more about why are people becoming radicalized and how do we stop that? How do we stop making more gremlins? I used to use this comparison in the Middle East. You can't kill your way through the war on terror. You can't kill your way or lock up all the extremists. You have to go upstream and change the way people become extremists. And in my view, relative to that, the number one recruiting tool is Donald Trump. Like, you got to deal with him. He has the biggest megaphone. He's the biggest spirit animal. He's the Maqtada al-Sadr of this extremist American insurgency. And you have to start with identifying, isolating, and finding ways to deal with him. And I hope he goes. The fact that he's not in jail, I think, is a national disgrace. I think the world has to see America put Donald Trump in handcuffs and do the perp walk. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that's what we need to restore our credibility on the national stage.
Yes, because
international stage.
Accountability for your actions matters, and it certainly changes the impact on how people see what their future actions might be. And more importantly, dude is saying one thing over and over that's been so effective at radicalizing anybody. If I believed it, I'd be in the streets. I would have rushed the Capitol. I might have done if I thought that the election was overthrown. I remember, it's crazy that people believe that, but of course they believe it because the former president and so many people in the media and in Congress repeated it as well. And if you
and there's no accountability. I think that's an important point that often gets overlooked. Let's talk about the easy stuff. There hasn't been any accountability for Afghanistan collapsing, right? Like Jake Sullivan's still got a job. Blinken's still got a job. Biden wants to be different from Trump. And I'm not comparing the two directly, but there's no accountability for that either. Like, when are people held accountable in government for failing miserably? The Afghanistan war that went on for 20 years. Thankfully, we're now going to have an investigation. We're going to have a 4-year study of what went wrong. Many people oppose that, but we need to bring accountability back
I think that's
in leadership.
I think a lack
across
of
the board.
I absolutely think a lack of accountability has jaded an entire generation of Americans across the political spectrum because, you didn't mention Iraq. You didn't mention the financial crisis. You didn't mention torture. I mean, all of these things. We're just talking about the national government. When there is accountability in places like, the water in Flint, the former governor and others, and in other places, you can look at other countries, then credibility of the institutions goes back up. We couldn't agree more on the necessity of accountability, but also let me just go inside what do you think is the radicalizing, give us examples or anecdotes of how active duty or veterans become radicalized. Is it they're just listening to this media outlet and getting more and more enraged? They don't have something going on in their life. I mean, give me, what do you think it is?
It's really simple. And it's the same answer I give you when you ask me a question for the last 15 years about anything impacting the veterans community. They are a reflection of society. They get radicalized in many of the same ways that anyone else gets radicalized. That dude you went to high school with, that person on your Facebook page, how did they get there? You saw them go in that direction, or maybe one day they just went off the edge that day. But the difference is these folks are uniquely isolated. They are in many ways uniquely aware. They are politically involved. They feel a sense of duty and patriotism and a sense of community. And many of them have felt that their honor has been violated, whether you agree with that or not. They are uniquely sensitive to what's going on in the country and what they perceive as attacks on the country that they signed up to protect. And they're just targeted. In the same way I get targeted by the University of Phoenix for for-profit schools because they know that I'm a veteran and they can get my GI Bill money, the Oath Keepers are recruiting. They're looking for those guys who get out of the military, who are alone, who got out of a divorce, who are getting out of jail, right? I mean, you watch Yellowstone, like when they sit outside of the prison, they look for the guy they're going to brand, right? Who's a cow? If Yellowstone listeners know what I'm talking about. You find the person who's down on their luck, who needs redeeming, and you make them feel a part of something, right? That's really what it's all about. Right. They're not alien species from another planet. They're people you went to high school with. And they went down a series of trails that pulled them in.
So much of it is that just wanting to be, in a group with men, especially just want to have a group of guys that you meet up with on the weekend. You shoot your guns, you ride your four-wheelers, you play Dungeons and Dragons, even if it's not a violent or radical thing.
You feel powerful. They want to feel powerful. They want to feel like they have control over their lives. And having a gun, being a part of something, being heard, being listened to. I mean, it's not that different from an AA meeting. I mean, people want to be a part of something. And if you can get to them first with someone they trust, with a message they understand, and really hope. This is what people don't really understand, that for Oath Keepers and others, this represents to them hope. You have to understand the enemy, right? Understand that the people in Al-Qaeda thought they were freedom fighters. They thought they were right and we were wrong. Right. And so do people in the Oath Keepers. You have to get inside their head and understand where they're coming from. And then you could get to the core of how it started.
But I feel like you're kind of talking about retired military or civilians or, guys that are out. And what about those that are in? You see this op-ed written by those three former generals. You see a lot of concern about the current active duty military and what decisions they make and who's currently in the military that believes in these ideologies, that believes the election was overthrown, supports the former president and his agenda. What do you do about those that are in? How concerned are you about those that are in, whether it be the military or the National Guard, I think is of deep concern to a lot of people?
I am actually less concerned because there are more checks and balances. You have to check out weapons. You have accountability. People know where you are all the time, right? When you're in the active duty military, you know where every duty, if he bounces a check at the supermarket. Right. And there is a community that holds you accountable. Of course, there are always outliers. Of course, there are bad apples. Of course, there are legitimate threats within. Mike Flynn's brother is someone that I wouldn't have had in the key decision-making process around January 6th. Right.
Yeah.
I would have said, hey, man, conflict of interest. We're sending you to Alaska. Right. I mean, there's some things like that I think political leaders have been a little bit wishy-washy or even weak or afraid to deal with. So I do think that's important. But I am more concerned about not just veterans, but this is a whole nother class, Pete, the wannabe veterans, the wannabes, the guys who got kicked out of the military, gals who got kicked out of the military, the ones who never could get in, the ones who never really got trained about values, but glamorized because they played so much Call of Duty, or they, the idiots who have the guns around their Christmas tree with their fingers in the wrong place, wearing Crocs. I mean, these are the people that fetishize the military. And they are more numerous, in my opinion, and they are more vulnerable. And in many ways, I think they're more dangerous. They're a lot like the school shooters, right? When you look at the school shooters, there's a profile that they often fall into. And I think over time, you'll see that more of them are those type than veterans. And that's true even of the veterans who've been involved in violence. They're often people who've been kicked out, who are chaptered out, who failed to get in. Those checks do need to be much better, though. We have to be able to track their social media, track their tattoos, things that are obvious flags for extremism. And the military has done a shitty job of this. I say this all the time. When Obama was president, you could fly a Confederate flag in the barracks. It was okay. Now, that's Obama. Obama could have stomped that out. Others could have stomped that out and said, hey, Confederate flag, not okay in the active duty military. But they dragged their feet on that stuff for a long time. Yeah. So it's kind of a de-Baathification almost. Right? That's an extreme way to look at it. But after Iraq, you had to de-Baathify. They tried to de-Baathify, which was in many ways a mistake.
Right.
I think how we approach it has to be nuanced. And we can't just kick them all out, and you can't just send them all to ground. It's a lot more difficult than that.
And on just kind of a different note, I guess, speaking of which, you were way out front, I think, in the veterans community talking about mandates for vaccination for anybody in active duty. And I just saw this headline where apparently like 28 of the top elite SEALs or more were they filing suit or they get kicked out or whatever for not getting
they probably get recruited by Sean Hannity, and it's the same, people who took war criminals and put them on tour with Donald Trump. I mean, this is the core of many of the things we're talking about. Veterans and the military are very powerful politically. They're very powerful in our society. The military is one of the institutions that is still held with esteem, and that's been damaged tremendously in the last 8 to 10 years, right? This is really, really scary, right? Now, people don't trust our military. They don't trust the chairman of Joint Chiefs. That's the culmination of all this politicization and shit that's happened over time. But I think it is very, very dicey right now. But be wary of the props. Every politician does it. And Sean Hannity would love to find the 28 Navy SEALs that said they weren't going to follow a direct order. You know what I say? Get the fuck out. Get the shot or get the fuck out. If you can't follow orders, you shouldn't be in the military. It's fine if you don't want to get the shot. Just find another place of employment. And you should pay the taxpayer back for all the money that they invested in you. But the military is not the place for you. You have freedom. You have lots of freedoms, but you give a lot of them up when you join the military. You also can't be fat. You have to wear a helmet. You can't do drugs all the time. There are a lot of things you give up when you join the military. And part of that is, allowing yourself to be vulnerable to a virus that could compromise your health and unit integrity and force protection. This is a no-brainer in my book. And I do think that Biden dragged his feet for too long on this.
Just to be clear, I mean, whatever the numbers are that get reported of those who don't want to get the vaccine, they are pale. They're minority. They're a fraction of a percentage.
Yeah.
Like when you say 28 SEALs, it's like, well, there's thousands of them. So like what?
I could pull the numbers. I think it's like 98% of the Air Force at this point. And let me draw a really interesting comparison. Your listeners will appreciate. Do you remember when they said if they allow gays in the military, they're all going to leave? Right. And everybody said, if you let in gays, I'm quitting. I'm not. Yeah. When it comes down to it, they don't fucking fall on their sword. They say, you know what? I got a paycheck. Yeah. I got to put food on the table. The wife or husband says, hey, asshole, your political beliefs, we got kids to feed. Right. And they're all big talkers until that paycheck is on the line. Then they shut the fuck up and they do their job. And that's what most people do. And that's what I think you'll see here, too.
All right, man. What else? Anything else you wanted to rant about, talk about, mention, bring up? I mean, I did see that Rolling Stone article in your Twitter timeline about the victim's advocate who got kicked out of, got fired or whatever it was. Sexual assault in the military is horrific. It is an epidemic. And some lady reports, some veteran reports she's raped and then by a Delta SEAL team member, I guess. And then the advocate for her gets in trouble. It's terrible. It's a terrible story. And I saw a tweet about it. I don't know if something you can talk about.
If I had to quantify what is daily hurting and wounding and compromising our military, I mean, the extremism is obviously very serious, but sexual assault and sexual harassment and toxic acts against women in particular is a cancer that's eating our military alive. And it's happening on the battlefields. It's happening in the barracks. It's happening in a much more widespread manner. We have the data. We've seen it. And there have been a lot of foot dragging about changes that need to be made. We did, advocacy groups got in the defense authorization bill some changes that are long overdue that take the power away from unit commanders and bring in independent investigators to deal with these. That was a long fight. Gillibrand led the fight with many advocacy groups, and that's changing. I think the thing that's what's next is something I tweeted about this week, which was, most Americans didn't see that a radical right-wing gunman killed 5 people in Denver on Monday. Went in, it was looking to kill women, was an extreme right-wing radicalized person who was this like super male guy who had this weird worldview, but he killed 5 people. He shot a female cop who shot him back and killed him. This is the kind of lone wolf, extremist, insurgent type attack that I think we are going to see more of and needs to get more attention and examination. I think most of your listeners didn't even hear about it. But this crazed radical person went on a mission to kill people and killed 5. And if not for one heroic cop named Agent Ferris, he would have killed a lot more. And she's still, I think, in the ICU right now with a bullet in her belly, but she took him out before he could kill more people. Those stories are serious. They're almost like the new school shootings. They're happening so often now that they're not registering, but these are very dangerous, and I think an important reflection into what I continue to call the American insurgency. I don't know how big it is, right? Important clarifier. An insurgency can be small or it can be big, but there is a lot of elements of this that are kind of emerging on a daily basis in Denver. If you live in Denver, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I got confused because there was a shooting in Denver, I feel like 2 weeks ago, because I had a friend there. I happened to be paying attention to it, but I don't think I saw this. I certainly...
Nobody saw it. No, when I tweeted it, I said, hey, I bet you haven't seen this, right? I said, how many people in America didn't even hear this happen? And then I think like Soledad O'Brien and Malcolm Nance picked it up, and now it's got like 1,000 likes. All these people say, I didn't even hear about this. They heard a lot about the snow in D.C., and they heard a lot about, all kinds of other shit.
These things, but the point is because they are what they are, and they are happening so rapidly, and it's hard to know how serious to take them. And in this case, this is worst case scenario where he took lives, but in other cases, it's guys, some guy got picked up in Iowa or something for planning to go kill Biden and Harris. I mean, it's happening. This is real. Weekly at different stages. And this isn't the FBI infiltrating an extremist group and arguably entrapping them, creating a situation where they learn how to make a bomb like they did with a lot of the, jihadist types. Those kinds of, remember the headlines it would make if some Muslim guy, whether he's American or not, was at the root of a planning or whispered something? We'd go crazy, and it would be national media. This shit is happening with these types every week at different levels of preparedness and effectiveness. And it's so I'm glad you mentioned it.
He said this guy was named Lyndon McLeod, who went on a deadly rant. He had been an author of alt-right philosophies about masculine supremacy, contrarian COVID-19 beliefs, and targeted violence against the weak, including those he killed. He wanted to kill women specifically. I mean, this is like a demented manifestation of a movement. It's not necessarily connected and joined up and coordinated, but this is what a movement is. It's people, just like in Iraq in 2004, a young guy might wake up and say, oh, you know what? I don't like the Americans being in my country. Fuck that. I'm going to go throw a bomb out my window. This guy in Denver could have heard or got latched onto any of it and said, today's my day. I'm going to go be a fucking hero for the cause. And he decided to go out and do it. And that's happening more. It's statistically
well, the idea that he hated women, the idea that he hated women and got shot and killed by a female cop is not lost on anyone. But the Denver Post says that his recommended books were essentially neo-Nazi pamphlets. I mean, we can call these kind of ideologies all kinds of different, and there's no probably accurate one to catch all. But it would seem that neo-Nazi is a thing. Last week, I interviewed Christopher Goldsmith, who knows you, and he's a former veteran working with other veterans to kind of like root these guys out wherever they live, online especially. There's way too much of it. Way too much of it.
I mean, that's he's been doing a great job of elevating this issue and helping people understand how real the threat is. I mean, we need more of these domestic terrorist watchdogs. We need people to understand the threat. It's like Malcolm Nance, who goes on MSNBC all the time and talks about different types of terror threats around the globe. People need to understand it's here too. And I think we have a little bit of war on terror hangover, where we don't understand how similar a lot of it is. But I mean, it's said a lot. But if a bunch of Muslim guys took over the Capitol, they'd all be in Gitmo right now. And I think it's one place where there has been accountability is now they are finally arresting, I don't know, is it 600 or so at this point? The sentences are too light, but they are sending a message that, hey, if you join a stupid mob and do a stupid thing, you're a part of something stupid, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That is a message that needs to be rammed home. If I were Biden, I'd have Jen Psaki reading the names and holding their pictures up every fucking day. Say, this is what happens when you take over the Capitol. You go to Gitmo. Send them to Gitmo. There's plenty of room down there now.
We're sitting here talking about all these high-profile things. Obviously, January 6th, but one of the worst one before that was, of course, in Michigan, in the State House in Michigan, where they plotted to kidnap the governor and the Secretary of State and all that. I mean, those guys were walking around, and it always comes back to our gun laws, our Lex gun laws. In Michigan, they were allowed to bring rifles, high-powered rifles, into the State House, into like the Senate chamber with their guns. So there is going to be more blood and violence as long as the gun laws are the way they are, or even if you change the gun laws, there's already hundreds of millions of guns on the street, and these guys all have them. And by the way, the whole concept of, Americans could never, beat the United States government, a ragtag group of guys with small arms versus, F-16s and helicopters and all that. I'm like, how naive do you have to be? That's very naive, I think.
Yeah, you have to stay vigilant. I'm going to keep coming back to leadership. Look, and I'm not here to bang on Democrats all the time, but you know who can be a lot harder on people? Nancy Pelosi. When a member of Congress goes around a metal detector, okay, or carries a weapon, okay, there have been like these fines that are less than what Antonio Brown gets for walking off the field in an NFL game. Put him in handcuffs, put him in jail. If you disrespect the metal detectors and you're a member of Congress, put him in cuffs. Put them in cuffs, walk them across the Capitol, have them sit in a jail cell, and fine them into oblivion because they are setting an example. If you can't hold a member of Congress responsible, these guys think, hey, if he can do it, I can do it. And those messages are really important. And I think the Democrats have been way too soft on radical members of Congress who have said what they're going to do. If they say they're going to do it, believe them. That's what Donald Trump taught us. Believe what he says he will do. Don't give them the benefit of the doubt.
All right, Paul, I could keep talking to you. I really appreciate it, man. It's great to catch up. Another great conversation with you, and best of luck in 2022. When do you think you get the Omicron? Next week, week after?
I gotta go take a test after this.
But you're ready. Like, are you resigned to the point? Hey, and I don't feel like people keep making the point. I avoided it this long, and now I'm finally going to get it. Fine, I got 3 shots.
I think I got it in February of when it all started. Before there was testing, and my wife and I I got back from a Valentine's Day interview of Henry Rollins in Los Angeles.
Ooh.
I interviewed Henry Rollins, and then I got back from LA, and I thought I was going to die. And I thought it was a really bad flu, and I was on my ass for days and couldn't breathe. And at that time, I didn't know. But point is, yeah, I mean, I don't want to get it. And I got a 2-year-old who's not vaccinated. I don't want to roll the dice and find out what happens to 2-year-olds. I want to keep my kids safe and want to do the best I can. And I also want to do my part not to make other people vulnerable and sick. So we bulked up on the N95 masks. The helmet is here. The car is stocked. If anybody needs some motivation, Pete Dominic will bring it to you.
I don't want to be a dick, but that helmet's not going to prevent you from getting COVID. I just want to be.
No,
I don't know
but
what
the helmet is going to prevent me from getting hit with a bottle when some jackass is on his way to your school board meeting and is just throwing stuff at me because he thinks I might be you on steroids, right? Like
that
we look a lot alike from afar.
That has happened before, by the way. Paul has been attacked several times. People yelling at him, "I hate you, Pete Dominic." And he's like, "Listen, I'm with you, man. I'm not him, though."
I'm looking for. Here's what I'll leave you with. I actually am trying to be about love and peace. And I've been watching a lot of Mr. Rogers. The kids have been watching a lot of Mr. Rogers.
That's awesome.
But I'm not kidding you, man. Like, I think that, there is so much anger. We as parents got to dial it down. The fighting fire with fire is not always going to work. I mean, I had Tavis Smiley on my show and he was talking about Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, we do need a little more of that. I'm not saying be passive. I'm not saying get run over. I'm not saying be weak. But, the automatic response that's fueled by social media to scream back and scream louder is taking us down a dangerous path. So I want to see, some more Buddhist tactics and people sitting in and, hunger strikes, Pete. Start a hunger strike. I know you can yell. How long can you go without food, man? How long can you go without weed? Let's do it. How long can you go without
listen.
Shit.
You've got you've raised a number of issues that are causing me great anxiety and concern. I don't need to answer either of those.
We should do a fundraiser or just fundraise for your show. See how many days Pete could go, like the equivalent of what is it, dry January?
Yeah.
Do it for the cause, Pete.
I could go. I could turn it on and off. I'm all right.
January is a tough time to turn it off.
I'm not addicted to anything.
Well, we're addicted to you, and I appreciate all you did in 2021 to bring everybody positivity, and all your listeners are awesome.
Likewise, buddy. I appreciate you.
You also, you respect the game, man. You have been grinding like a motherfucker, and I understand it because I do this But what you've been doing is grinding.
That's right. Thank you.
Really,
thank you for I played your message on the show. Thank you very much for leaving. I forgot to thank you here on the record. I think I reached out to you privately.
That's because you're grinding, man.
Yeah.
I love it. It's important.
I love doing it. It's a lot of work, but I'm really enjoying it. I love my shed. I like.
Shed looks good. The shed looks good. Happy David Bowie's birthday. David Bowie's birthday is Saturday, and you kind of got it. It was a Prince vibe.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
A lot more red than last
That's
time.
why I knew that about David Bowie's birthday. That's why I did this lighting.
Happy David Bowie's birthday.
Stand up. All right, there you go. Paul Rieckhoff. You never want to end it. We always enjoy our conversations. We didn't really get into it today. We didn't really get into an argument today, first time in a while. But I enjoyed our conversation, as always. Go support all of his work. Independent Americans. He's always been so supportive of me and mine. Follow him on Twitter as well. Let him know that you heard him here. That'll mean a lot. Paul Rieckhoff on Twitter. All of the links to my guests and everything about me and the show are in every day's show notes. If you haven't written a review of the show, please do that on Apple Podcasts and now on Spotify as well. And by the way, yesterday, as it happens usually, I don't know, once a week, hopefully less, there was a little error. There was a couple areas of silence and technical areas in the show, and Joe Liotta, I think it was, told me, and so I took it out, and I re-edited it and re-uploaded it. And when I do that sometimes, it makes it harder for some people downloading it. I don't know why, but when I replace the file, so if you have that issue and you listen on Apple Podcasts, then maybe go over to Spotify if you have that. And if you don't have either of those, you can usually click on the link in the show notes. If you're a subscriber, you can always listen to it on the Patreon app itself, which you get that email every day. But there's so many ways to listen to the show that if the way that you normally listen to is not working and it's frustrating, and I know it's happened to me too, then there are many other ways to listen. So you can always email me if you have problems listening to the show, and I almost always get back to people with a link that's an alternative. So hopefully that alleviates that frustration for anybody. I know it was frustrating to Mom yesterday, but those editing mistakes. Damn fake producer Keith. That's all I got time for today. Thanks again to Paul Rieckhoff, to Andrew Spar. Go to givewell.org/standup, please, and make a donation. Subscribe for a recurring donation, maybe, and sign up for a subscription to the show. You'll see us tonight at the Hangout if you want. 8 Eastern. If you're a community member, you can hang out with us virtually. Always a great time. I'll hope to see you there tonight. Maybe John Carroll will be there. He's always here with us, singing us out. Here he is right now. Take it away, Johnny.
So long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you can see him flee the scene of that experiment. If you stand up, all right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.